Today's submitted material explores the fundamentals of the nervous system, with a specific focus on the anatomy and function of glial cells, the critical support structures that vastly outnumber neurons. But framing glial cells merely as the supporting cast undermines the revelation of their overwhelming majority and critical functions in the nervous system.
I mean, I take that a step further and argue it actually fights against the whole foundational narrative the author is trying to establish here.
Right?
Because the material sets up this deeply fascinating biological reality right out of the gate, We get a text that clearly establishes glial cells make up roughly half the mass of the brain.
Yeah, and they outnumber the neurons by what, like 10 to 1?
Exactly. An estimated 10 to 1. That is a staggering physical reality. So it perfectly positions these glial cells as, well, the forgotten majority of the brain. But then, and this is the weakness, the vocabulary choices immediately undermine that massive physical presence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And here is where the friction really starts for the reader. The author leans heavily on this very traditional, highly neuron-centric language.
Right, the wise guys.
Yes, the text explicitly states that neurons do most of the heavy lifting. And it goes on to refer to them as the wise guys that help us ace exams, invent technologies, think of snappy comebacks.
And meanwhile, the glial cells get described as what? Passive gaggles?
Yeah, gaggles. And they're referred to merely as the glue or the static scaffolding holding all the important things together.
Which is a huge structural weakness, because it completely minimizes the intrigue of the very subject it's trying to elevate. So, the suggestion here is to redefine the glial cells not just as, passive scaffolding, but as the active, dynamic infrastructure that makes all that heavy lifting of the neurons actually possible.
Right. We need to give these glial cells narrative weight that's equivalent to their sheer physical mass in the brain.
Exactly.
Though, the material makes a strong case for the importance of neurons by highlighting their massive metabolic requirements, like noting they consume about 25% of the calories we take in every day. So I want to push back just a bit here on behalf of the author.
Sure, go ahead.
Isn't this intense focus on the neurons just, a necessary simplification? In an introductory piece about biology, you naturally want to focus the reader on the cells transmitting the conscious thoughts and actions, right? Because that's what the audience can relate to, the neurons or the conscious experience.
I mean, that's clearly laid out, yeah. I wonder, though, if we've considered the cost of that specific type of simplification.
How do you mean?
Well, simplification is absolutely necessary, yes, but simplification doesn't have to mean passive marginalization. Is there a risk that focusing solely on the neurons as the doers might overlook an enormous opportunity to genuinely blow the audience's mind about how the brain actually operates as a holistic ecosystem?
Ah, I hear what you were saying. By simply calling them glue, which, to be fair, is literally what the Greek word glia translates to.
Right, sure.
The author is basically keeping the reader stuck in a 19th century understanding of the brain. If you tell a reader that something is a 10 to 1 majority, but then immediately call it glue, you just drain all the narrative tension right out of the room.
Completely. The reader subconsciously files glial cells away as, unimportant, passive background material. We really need a paradigm shift in how we describe them.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, to achieve that shift, we need a robust, concrete analogy that relies on active verbs, not passive nouns. So, instead of glue, let's reframe this relationship using a bustling, high-stakes city analogy.
Oh, I like that.
Right. If the neurons are the high-profile politicians, the ones standing at the podium, taking all the credit for acing the exam or winning the argument, the glial cells are the essential, active infrastructure keeping the city from collapsing into total anarchy.
So they're the power grid.
Yes, the power grid, the sanitation workers, the military defense.
That immediately injects agency into their existence. Because if the neurons are consuming 25% of our daily calories, they aren't managing that supply chain themselves. They're way too busy firing action potentials.
Exactly. Yes, and that brings us to the concrete examples we can adjust in the text. When discussing astrocytes, the text currently notes they govern the exchange of materials between neurons and capillaries.
Which sounds a bit dry.
Very dry. Instead of leaving that as a passive fact, portray astrocytes as the active resource managers of the city. They are the ones frantically pulling the levers, deciding exactly where the city's blood and energy go in real time based on which neurons are firing.
Right, so if a neuron is firing rapidly because you are taking a math test,
The astrocyte actively dilates the local blood vessels to rush glucose to that specific area.
adding to that, we can look at the microglia. The text mentions they, protect the neurons. But we can frame them as the active military defense units and the sanitation department combined.
Oh, absolutely.
They are physically patrolling the streets of the brain, actively hunting for invading microorganisms or, like, sweeping up dead cellular debris.
That is exactly the kind of active phrasing we need. By changing the verbs from passive like holding and governing to active like patrolling, hunting, and fueling, you fulfill the promise of that 10-to-1 ratio.
You make the forgotten majority feel actually indispensable.
Right, because a city can survive a day without its politicians, but it cannot survive a day without its power grid and sanitation workers.
That's a great way to look at it. But it's not enough just to give these individual cells active verbs. If we just take all these newly active characters and dump them onto the page at the same time, we hit another major roadblock.
Oh?
Yeah, because grouping the 6 distinct types of glial cells into a single, dense catalog disrupts the otherwise engaging, narrative-driven pacing of the material.
Oh, yes. This is probably the most significant structural bottleneck in the entire submission. Because up to this point, the pacing of the material is incredibly strong.
Let's look closely at the section discussing the sensory pathways, where the author uses that fantastic spider analogy.
So good.
It really is. They ask the reader to imagine a spider walking onto a bare knee, and they use that vivid scenario to beautifully illustrate sensory input, integration, and motor output. It's brilliant. It grounds the abstract science in this immediate, physical stake that makes the reader's own skin crawl.
It is a phenomenal hook, but the weakness emerges right after that success.
Right.
The text completely drops this highly relatable, dynamic scenario and just suddenly pivots into a rapid-fire textbook-style list of cell types. Astrocytes, microglial, ependyal.
Oligodendrocytes, satellite cells, Schwann cells. Yeah. In a single, dense section, the reader is just hit with a barrage of Greek and Latin prefixes. It feels like pausing an action movie right before a high-speed car chase to make the audience read a spreadsheet of the characters' biographies.
That is a perfect way to put it.
The descriptions themselves are actually quite vivid, though. Like, describing the microglia as thorny-looking gives a great visual. But the forward momentum of the piece just hits a brick wall. It's the difference between showing a museum exhibit of static engine parts sitting behind glass versus showing that same engine actively firing, burning fuel, and producing torque during a street race.
Building on that point, what if we looked at it from the perspective of the narrative momentum you just mentioned? The suggestion here is to fully integrate the introduction of the specific glial cells directly into the active, scenario-based storytelling that the author already successfully established.
So, weaving them into the action.
Exactly. We don't need a standalone catalog of cells separated by bullet points. We need to see the cells working in the context of the story.
Okay, I can see where you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this practically. How exactly would you weave a catalog of anatomical terms into that moment without, slowing down the story of the spider on the knee?
Well, instead of listing a term like Schwann cells in a vacuum under a peripheral nervous system header, just return to the spider. When that creeping sensation on the knee triggers a panic signal, that electrical impulse has to travel rapidly up the axon from the leg to the spine, right?
Right.
So spotlight the Schwann cells right then and there. Show them actively insulating that exact electrical signal in real time.
Oh, because if they didn't insulate it, the signal would decay and you wouldn't feel the spider until it actually bit you.
Precisely the stakes we want to highlight. You show the Schwann cells acting as the vital insulation wrapped around the wiring of the leg, ensuring the panic signal reaches the spinal cord at lightning speed.
That anchors the vocabulary word Schwann cell to a real physiological feeling of urgency. It makes it incredibly memorable because we're in the passenger seat watching the spark plugs fire. We aren't just reading the manual.
Exactly.
And we can do the same for the others. Like when the person recoils in horror, violently lashing their hand out to swat the spider, that physical jolt violently shakes the entire head.
Which is the perfect active moment to introduce the ependymal cells.
Yes, show the ependymal cells actively circulating the cerebral spinal fluid. Show the reader how that fluid is currently rushing to cushion the physical mass of the brain against the hard bone of the skull during that violent, jerky movement.
That is a highly effective way to teach complex vocabulary. You aren't asking the reader to memorize what an ependymal cell does on some multiple-choice test. You're having them experience what it does in a moment of crisis.
Yeah, it totally changes the dynamic.
By dissolving the static catalog and distributing those anatomical facts into the timeline of an actual event, the pacing never stops. The reader learns the anatomy almost by accident because they are so invested in the physiological drama of the spider. It transforms a lecture into an experience.
But even if we weave these cells into the narrative action, the reader still has to mentally organize these characters. And right now, the way they're categorized in the text is kind of working against the biology.
Oh, definitely.
Because the strict anatomical division between central and peripheral nervous system glial cells creates an artificial barrier to understanding their shared functional purpose.
Yes, this is a classic pedagogical trap, especially in biology writing. The weakness here is rooted in geographical categorization. The material separates the discussion of oligodendrocytes, which are placed in the central nervous system paragraph, from the Schwann cells, which are relegated to the peripheral nervous system paragraph.
And it does the exact same thing with astrocytes and satellite cells.
Exactly.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on geographical location, like whether a cell lives in the brain or in the leg, might just overload the reader's working memory?
It's a massive risk. The text forces the reader to memorize 4 distinct, highly technical vocabulary words purely based on where they live in the body. By separating them physically on the page, the text obscures the much more important reality.
Which is that these cells are functional twins.
Exactly. Oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells both exist to do the exact same thing, create myelin insulation. Astrocytes and satellite cells both exist to provide structural and metabolic support.
Is the connection between these paired cells fully established in the material, or is that an area to potentially bolster? Because looking closely at the text, the author actually does hint at this logic. At one point they write, Schwann cells are similar to your oligodendrocytes in that they wrap around axons.
That makes sense, but could the evidence also support a much bolder structural choice? The author absolutely knows these cells are functional twins, but the current structure treats that functional similarity as an afterthought, like a minor footnote to their geographical location.
So what's the fix?
The suggestion is to invert this hierarchy, group these cells by their overarching functional parallels first, anchor the reader with practical everyday concepts they already intuitively understand, like insulation and support, before you bother explaining their regional differences.
Okay, I want to challenge this from the perspective of traditional neuroscience, though. Isn't the division between the central and peripheral nervous systems the most fundamental way neuroscientists map the body?
Sure, historically.
Right, this is how the discipline was built, largely through dissection. You study the brain and spine, and then you study the limbs. Why shouldn't the text mirror the standard anatomical map?
It's a fair question, and historically, you are right. But we have to remember the goal of the material, which is comprehension for an audience trying to grasp the functional fundamentals. The body itself doesn't care about our historical mapping systems.
It just cares about keeping the electricity flowing.
Precisely. If you teach geography first, you're just handing a beginner a map filled with unpronounceable names and expecting them to find meaning in it. If you teach function first, you're teaching them the core logic of how the systems actually survive.
So how would you concretely restructure this in the text to ease that cognitive burden?
Introduce a concept like the insulators. Explain to the reader that creating the myelin sheath around an axon is so unbelievably crucial for survival, literally preventing electrical signals from short-circuiting into nearby tissue, that the body has 2 entirely dedicated, highly specialized teams just for that one job.
Right, so you introduce the oligodendrocytes as the insulation team specifically assigned to the central brain and spine.
Yep. And then the Schwann cells as the insulation team deployed to the outer limbs.
I see. You are pairing them up by their day jobs. And then you just do the same for support cells.
Exactly the same approach. You introduce the anchors. You explain that neurons are incredibly high maintenance, they don't have the capacity to store their own nutrients, so they need constant structural and metabolic support.
So the body assigns astrocytes to anchor and feed the central system, and satellite cells to anchor and feed the peripheral system.
By doing that, you've reduced the cognitive load significantly. Instead of asking the reader to memorize 6 random, disconnected items scattered across different geographical regions, you're asking them to remember just a few basic job descriptions.
The insulators, the anchors, and the immune defenders.
And once they deeply understand the job, learning the specific names of the cellular employees doing that job in different parts of the body becomes so much easier. It honors the biological symmetry of the body. More importantly, it creates a much cleaner, more logical flow for the reader. They aren't memorizing a map, they are understanding a system.
That makes total sense. All right, let's pull all of this together. The material submitted today has incredibly strong foundational research and a fantastic sense of voice. The spider analogy alone proves the author knows how to captivate an audience.
Absolutely.
But to elevate this piece so that it truly reflects the brilliance of its subject matter, we've discussed 3 main actionable takeaways. First, redefine the narrative weight of the glial cells. Move away from passive 19th century terms like glue and use a dynamic high-stakes city infrastructure analogy to prove they are the active, vital majority of the brain. They are the power grid and the sanitation workers that keep the neurons alive.
Right. And building on that momentum, the second takeaway is to dissolve the static textbook catalog of cell types. Weave those 6 specific glial cells directly into the active, moving scenario of the spider on the knee. Let the reader experience the Schwann cells insulating the panic signal and the ependymal cells cushioning the brain during the recoil. Turn the museum exhibit into a street race.
Love that. And third, categorize those cells by their shared biological functions first, like the insulation team and the structural support team, before dividing them by their central or peripheral geographic locations. This simple structural inversion will massively reduce cognitive overload and make the complex vocabulary stick naturally.
The underlying writing here is genuinely compelling. And with these structural shifts, it really has the potential to profoundly change how an audience visualizes the inner workings of their own minds. We highly encourage the author to apply these frameworks, revise the piece, and submit your work back in for future feedback. We love seeing how these concepts evolve.
We really do. When we look up at the night sky, it's easy to be captivated by the bright, flashing stars, just as it's easy to be captivated by the lightning storm of neurons. But by giving the dark matter of the brain the forgotten majority of glial cells, the active narrative weight they truly deserve, you allow your audience to finally see the entire universe.